So the ancient world was generally very patriarchal. The men made the critical decisions. The men held the most important positions in society. The men went to war. That's how the society was basically structured. It was not everywhere. There were a few societies where women had a lot of say. We have the Amazons that I've talked about in another video, and some tribes of the Scythians. But generally, it was the men who ruled, generally. So it was something that was out of the ordinary for a woman to do some things. Now, as Xerxes is going to attack Europe, he had this army that he had put together, and I've told you this in my previous video, an army that was like about 1.7 million people. It was a huge army. And this army was composed of people from different nationalities. Now, the way Herodotus tells us how this army was structured, at the top, of course, there is Xerxes, and then there are these generals that are like next to him. All of them were Persians. And then there are other leaders of the army that were below the generals. Those also were mostly Persian. And then now there were the other leaders below those ones. Those ones were from different nations that contributed the army. Herodotus, while he gives us the names of the top generals, he doesn't tell us the names of these, I would say, level 3 generals. And that's because there were many. He decided not to. He said if he was to mention them, then you'd have spent a lot of time trying to do that. But he did say he found it necessary to mention one of those leaders, and that leader was Artemisia. And the reason he mentioned this Artemisia is because she was a woman. It basically seems like she was the only woman in this army of close to 1.7 people. And she was the only leader who was a woman in that army of Xerxes. And he tells us that Artemisia was a queen of a city-states known as Halicarnassia. And he tells us that how Artemisia came to be the queen there is that her husband, who was a king, died. And after his death, she took over and started ruling. And seems like she was a very competent leader. Of course, as a woman, she really had to be really competent for not only her people to accept her, but also Xerxes to accept her to come in and be in charge of a section of his army. Herodotus tells us that Artemisia contributed two things to the army of Xerxes. Of course, she contributed soldiers, but not only soldiers, but also a fleet of ships. And Herodotus tells us that the quality of our ships was second to that of the Phoenicians. Phoenicians were known to be very good at building ships and also using ships both for war and for trade. So hers were like number 2. They were really good. They were really valuable. And the other thing she contributed to Xerxes was her counsel. Herodotus tells us that she was among the people who Xerxes consulted a lot about war strategy and other matters. So it seems like she was very competent, that Xerxes will consider her to be as an advisor, even though where Xerxes came from, women did not hold that position. It was not common or normal for a woman in Persia to be an advisor to the king, at least not formally. So the fact that Artemisia was brought into inner circle of Xerxes and she was expected to provide advice on war strategy, it was something that Herodotus saw it as not normal, and that's why he decided to talk about Artemisia, even though he had decided he wasn't going to tell us the names of the other leaders who were of that level.